You can see too in Canada, grocery prices have gone up so much that it's actually hard to believe.
It's 22 or 23% that they've gone up just in the last couple of...
That's because of monopolization and capitalism. If you look at their profit margins, they've also gone up significantly as well for the CEOs, the board members, and all that kind of stuff, as well as the problem with stock buybacks. I'm going to quickly talk about local politics just because it's a life lesson for everybody when it comes to what are social democrats, what are liberals, what are conservatives, and how we got here in terms of now our upcoming election looks to be an absolute and complete disaster. And we got the Jordan Peterson interview as well, which we can't watch all of it because it's very boring, but I want to watch a little bit of it.
And thank you all for joining me. Politics, for me, has always been about doing what is best in the interests of British Columbians.
Okay, so I'm going to quickly explain before he gives his spiel what's taking place here. I made an educational sheet for everybody because I know sometimes local elections seem a little bit strange and confusing. So here's what our local elections used to be. This was the last election cycle. Basically, this group didn't really exist yet, so kind of pull them out of your mind. We had these two big parties. We had the BC United, which were kind of the Liberal Party, and the BC NDP, who were the Social Democrats. They don't win a lot. They hadn't really won since the 90s, but they won in the last two elections. So they've been in power for a while now, and people have kind of gotten used to the BC Democrats. Now, inside this party, BC United, was a guy called John Rustad. And John Rustad was too extreme for BC United. So he broke. He broke from them and formed this group called the BC Conservatives. So now it was a three-way race between the BC NDP, the BC United, and the BC Conservatives, until the leader of the BC United, just over the weekend, quit and dissolved his party. So the guy who runs BC United dissolves his party after he's been kicking out, the guy who's now the former of the BC Conservatives, and they join forces. And so now they combine forces, leading you to two choices in the upcoming election. It's going to be the BC NDP and the BC Conservatives. The BC Conservatives are more far-right than any other political party has been usually in my lifetime in the local elections. And the BC NDP, in response to a lot of their far-right kind of extreme policies that they're pushing, have moved into liberal territory. So they're now mostly libs. There's a big thing right now where everyone's like, I'm politically homeless. It just seems like two extremes. There's either a far-left party or a far-right party. As a leftist, I'll tell you this. The BC NDP are not far-left. They are more social democrat than probably a lot of liberal parties usually are, but they've moved to the right on things like now they're not doing as much harm reduction for drugs. They're very pro-construction and pro, the housing industry, and also very pro-energy, even though that seems to, infringe on a lot of Indigenous rights. And the BC Conservatives are far more right-wing and extreme, and that's going to be what the election choices come down to. It's weird how they came about after having someone kicked out of their party for being too extreme, and then the leader of the old one, the Libs, decides just to dissolve his party, and now he's given control to the extremist, essentially. That's how we got into it. So this is the old guy who used to have BC United, and the new extreme right-wing guy who's now basically going to be taking over their combined party.
I've spent my entire adult life fighting not only the NDP and their brand of left-wing socialism, but also fighting to unite the center-right. I did that in the 90s, when we were trying to bring together the Provincial Reform Party and the BC Conservative Party at the time to coalesce together under the BC Liberal Party. And now as a BC United Party, again, the name is about trying to unite people. But what became apparent to me as I've crisscrossed the province and heard from literally tens of thousands of people is the number one major concern that they had. And that is, Kevin, if you guys don't do the right thing and be the adults in the room and help bring together that free enterprise, center-right, common sense coalition, you are going to help elect an NDP government. And all of you that know me know that there is nothing more important to me and my children and your children and grandchildren that we not give the NDP one more day in power.
So this is wild. This is basically the Liberals dissolving their party and then uniting with the Conservatives, who are more far right than the BC United Party ever was, and in doing so saying that it's because, we have to do whatever we can to stop the BC NDP. He described him and their party as a clown car unfit for government. prior to this decision. But now everything's different, and now they're merging, and basically the merger means that a whole bunch of the people that used to work in his party, they're picking and choosing which ones they think are the most electable, and so some people are getting to run, others are not, but it's basically they're merging of the two in real time to see how that goes. Now there's articles about how intense this new political move is, if you can call it that. Kevin Falcon deserves credit for at least one thing, showing how deeply undemocratic our system is. Wait, two things. Falcon also showed the lack of democracy can let special interests try to rig elections. Falcon shut down the BC United campaign unilaterally without warning and just 7 weeks before an election. The elimination of a center-right option, forcing a polarizing choice between the BC Conservatives and the NDP, was done in late-night backroom deals between a handful of insiders. Party members, 44,000 in 2022, when Falcon won the leadership in a scandal-plagued race, had no say. 23 BC United MLAs and candidates fighting to be elected weren't consulted. The party board of directors had no real vote. The board endorsed the decision I made. The process stinks. Rob Shaw offers a great account of the BIV. To summarize, Falcon asked his sister-in-law, Caroline Elliott, BC United candidate in the West Vancouver Capilano, to reach out to Angelo Isididuro, the Conservative Party's executive director, to ask for a meeting, and then they met for a beer. 2 days later, they decided with Director Lindsay Cote, gathered for an afternoon meeting in Vancouver boardroom with the Conservative Party leader and the President Ashi Esty. By midnight, they joined and agreed to shut down the United campaign, fire all nominated candidates. He got nothing in return beyond Conservative leader John Rushad's agreement to consider allowing some United candidates and MLAs to run in the Conservative banner. There's something broken with the system that allows one person to shut down a party and remove a key option for voters 7 weeks before an election. And it's true. I was listening on the radio, and there's a ton of people calling in who are liberal, centrists, and they're really mad. They're like, I don't have representation at all now. They're like, I either have to vote for the party that I fought and is too left wing, the Social Democrats, or I have to vote for the more extreme right. That's the two options now. There's no centrist party available anymore. No real liberal party. Justin Hunter and Mike Hager reported on the business role in killing United campaign, the Globe and Mail. And the shitty thing about all this, from the libs basically collapsing and joining with the conservatives, which just sucks to see every time it happens in history, is also that the so-called leftist party is moving more to the center as a result. Like you're seeing that kind of whole thing happen in real time, which is also kind of unfortunate, because I don't think policies that are more centrist are necessarily going to win you elections, especially when they happen to do with the drug war, which is like the centerpiece of this whole election. Also, racism. Racism is also playing a bit of a role. You may recognize the Whatever podcast, the one that usually has one guy and 6 or 7 women on it, where they all talk about, they usually have a lot of alcohol and then talk about relationships and stuff like that. One of them happened to be married to one of the candidates in British Columbia. It's a small world, random, but this happened.
He's interesting. He teaches me a lot of things.
Like what?
Can't say.
The fuck?
Yeah, you're gonna censor me. Like very fascist ideas, I would say.
Fascist idea? Is he a white supremacist?
No, he's a white nationalist. He likes Nick Fuentes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you guys both only talking to each other?
Yes.
You think?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
What's your ethnicity?
Also, not a great thing when it's like something that's shocking the host of the Whatever podcast who's there, and he's like, wait, sorry, what's he all about? So this is the guy, by the way, Brian Breguet. He's running in the BC election, and he's the one who quote tweeted this, saying she's literally my wife, as she's describing him, being like, well, he's got a lot of kind of extreme views. You'd probably censor me if I told you them. So what were you talking about here? Fascist. He's like, wait, what? Is he like a white supremacist? No, a white nationalist. He really likes Nick Fuentes. Okay. Wait, what?
Just checking.
Korean.
Oh. And you're dating
Not dating.
Oh, but you want... So you're attracted to him because of his racist...
No, he's not racist.
Oh, sorry. You said he's a fascist. What did you say? White nationalist?
Mm-hmm. He's interesting.
Apparently he's not racist, so that's good. One of their own candidates, BCC, may be looking at Brian Breguet from Vancouver Langara. Here he shares a video of a woman of Asian heritage discussing how she's dating a, quote, white nationalist. He's literally my wife, and he's also apparently into Nick Fuentes. Just admitting to be a white nationalist. If John Rustad is going to clean up the slate, he needs to start here today, but we'll see. we'll see if the white nationalists are allowed to also be in the party, if it's going to be a big tent kind of a thing. Her breasts, her choice, not going to matter though. Time and gravity wait for no boob. Reddit is truly insane. This is a top comment in the thread about a husband saying his wife and mom of 1-year-old baby is refusing to breastfeed as not to damage her boobs. I really can't win this insane nihilism. You fucking decided to have a baby, act like a fucking mother. Jesus Christ, get your priorities straight. But of course Reddit thinks it's just a my body, my choice discussion. Disgusting. Well, yeah, there's a lot of reasons why women might not be able to breastfeed, and it's also one of the reasons why some people decide to use formula. Like, it's just kind of weird for you, the third party, to be all like, hey, you had a kid, you must provide the milk of the mother. According to Rusted's candidate, the role of the women is the homemaker and subordinate to the husband. Women choosing to breastfeed after not giving birth is disgusting and insane nihilism, as they should act like a fucking mother. Does Rusted know that women vote? Yes, but again, it's a very weird combination of right-wingers, some libs, but not a lot of libs were allowed to be as part of the cabinet, and a lot of the extreme right just getting their day to talk about this. So it's also pretty shitty. And this just popped up today. Brand new. This is the guy I'm talking to you about for this whole little segment. I'm sure you all know this piece of shit, and apparently it's the future of Canada.
Looking at the national stats, we have the number of people dying in British Columbia today on a daily basis waiting for diagnostic services or surgery is comparable to the number of people who are dying from the opioid crisis, and nobody's talking about it.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. Yeah. Like, this is, I find that completely unacceptable.
Say that again.
The number of people who are dying.
Part of the reason that we live so long is because as grandparents, we also help care for children. Like, human beings are wired to take a longer view if they can. But if you're desperately poor, you default to what is necessary right now. And that's often agricultural practices and so forth that aren't sustainable over the long run. And so, I figured this out about 15 years ago, that we could all have our cake and eat it too. If we used our energy resources wisely, if we knocked energy costs down, which should be a primary goal of politicians at every level of analysis, regardless of political party, if we knocked our energy costs down, we could eradicate poverty worldwide, and we could feed everybody, and then everybody would start taking care of their environment locally, which seems like an optimal. It's very, well, it borders on.
I mean, first off, one of the reasons we live a lot longer now is thanks to the modern medical science that we used to not really make fun of as much. But, things like vaccines, for example, have certainly helped extend human life, as has like a lot of understanding of just basically how the germ theory of disease works, and, our ability to both kind of control and prevent the mass spread of things like plagues. They've helped a lot. Yes, mass production of food, better food techniques, better pesticides have also contributed to the availability of mass-produced food and things like that. But please don't for a second ever believe the Jordan Petersons of the world who try to put climate change from the direction of we need more energy, so we need more oil, rather than we need more clean energy, because it's pretty clear at this point how the whole system works.
The alternative policies, in my estimation, border on genocidal. And I know already that the fact that energy costs have spiraled upwards is putting tremendous mortal pressure on the poorest people all around the world. You can see too in Canada, grocery prices have gone up so much that it's actually hard to believe.
It's 22 or 23% that they've gone up just in the last couple of.
That's because of monopolization and capitalism. If you look at their profit margins, they've also gone up significantly as well for the CEOs, the board members, and all that kind of stuff, as well as the problem with stock buybacks. But that's where that's coming. That's not climate change. That's single-handedly making all of your grocery store prices more expensive. But don't get me wrong. It eventually will. By a lot. Of course, there's going to be the mass failure of crops as the temperatures get hotter, especially in a lot of regions where they mass produce food, and we are importing a lot of that food, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world, no one's going to be escaping that. That is going to play a massive factor.
Of years, and you look at it, but you're right about energy as well. And you look at what's going on in the world, and you think, okay, so we're driving up their energy prices. And I think it was can't remember which country it was. The president of the country in Africa said, look, no country's ever been able to develop and to be able to meet its needs by going with wind and solar. They've had to use more dense energy, such as coal and then natural gas, and then obviously we need to get to nuclear. And I'll talk about nuclear in a minute, because that's a very interesting situation for BC.
Okay.
But when I look at that, there's a clear correlation between affordable energy and quality of life.
That's them on that. Wind and solar. What do you got to say about wind and solar?
As well as something that's of obvious benefit to human beings. And windmill littered landscapes are by no means beautiful. And I actually think that that's a problem, because ugly matters. But there's issues that are much more relevant.
Wait, what? Windmilled landscapes. You destroyed it. You destroyed our view.
Relevant than that. It's like solar panels don't last very long. They're very susceptible to hailstorms, for example. They're very energy demanding in their production. They're often manufactured in China and often using slave labor, which doesn't strike me as a particularly positive benefit. They tend to work very badly at night. And wind power, of course.
So again, this is all ridiculous. This is the same level of climate change denial that you're getting from Donald Trump, right? Just now it's being exported or imported, I should say, right into British Columbia, which also kind of really sucks. But it's now cheaper to produce electricity from solar power than it has ever been in human history, as well as the fact that it's cheaper to produce electricity through solar power than it is through most other methods. We have been mass producing, solar power, as well as just China has done incredibly well in investing heavily into solar power technology in order to reduce the cost of it all. It doesn't work when there's not sun. That's true. So in some regions of the world, that'll include half the day, which is why there's usually something else like a battery that the solar panels have to be attached to in order to put that energy in somewhere where it can be used when the lights go down. But as someone who has camped using solar power, I can tell you this: it does work. It's not going to destroy your life.
Both wind and solar costs spiral up towards the infinite as the supply decreases, right? So there's no solar at night. And my understanding of what that means is that even if we had a wind and solar grid, which we don't, that was reliable and that plentiful, which
coal power plants don't work when there's no coal. That's also true. That's true. Yes, that's also a fact.
We certainly don't and are nowhere near doing. We need a backup system anyways. And this is what's happened in Germany. And
exactly.
They took their bloody nuclear plants offline, and then they defaulted to coal, and then they burn lignite, which is the most polluting form of coal. And now in Germany, they have much less electricity. It's much more unstable. They're much more dependent on foreign tyrants for their energy, and they pollute more while they're deindustrializing.
Exactly.
So most of this is about energy, and if you didn't know already, he's refusing to back down on his basically anti-scientific stances on climate change. So perfect little, meeting of minds to have these two.
Disproportionate number of people like that in any domain where there's a lot of public attention. Okay, so it's going to happen on the political front. Okay, so now, how do you get competent politicians? Well, this is a real problem because most competent people are already doing something, especially if they're, say, 40 and above. They've got a career that's usually well established, that's quite productive. Or if they happen to be overachievers, they've got quite a little empire. I have some friends who are hyper successful, and I've talked to them about entering the political arena. And their comment often is, I would be less effective in the political role than I am doing what I'm already doing, because they'd have to put all that on hold as well. And so what that means is that not only are there a disproportionate number of self-serving narcissists in the political realm, is that it's very difficult to get people who are actually competent playing the political game, because it's difficult. It is very difficult. You have to have a very thick hide, too, to withstand the slings and arrows of your opponents and all the lies that come at you. I don't think I can tolerate that, quite frankly. I don't think I have the constitution for it. In any case, you have this option because you...
Oh, that's a kind of an interesting revelation, considering you chose your life to be like a far-right reactionary who pushes traditional concepts of gender, marriage, super transphobic.
You had your own company, which you could expand more or less in accordance with your competence, but you decided repeatedly to stay in the political realm. You also said your wife supported you, and that's also very interesting, because it would have been easier in some ways for her to just have you around and to have all that stress out of your life. So what is it about the relationship you have with your wife that has held you two together in the political realm, and why is she supporting you, given the personal costs, let's say, that might be associated with that?
Well, I guess it goes back when we were married, which was in 1995. We've been married now 29 years, coming up on 30 years. Shortly after we got married, we talked about raising a family. And so unfortunately, my wife had cancer. And she had cervical cancer, which was caught at an early stage. And so she was treated, and she's now 24 years cancer-free, which is wonderful, right? I mean, today in British Columbia, I have doctors telling me that it was fortunate it happened back then, because that may not have been the same outcome today.
Yeah, that's for sure.
See, I was going to say, I was like, oh shit, you got to be careful here. You're talking a little too good about the public healthcare system, because surprise, surprise, this guy wants to gut it and privatize healthcare in British Columbia as well, which has been an absolute disaster, I might say, in the other provinces that have far-right governments like Alberta that have done the same thing. Daniel Smith touts frightening AHS leaders handling hospitals to church-run systems as cures for Alberta's healthcare woes. Yes, church-run healthcare systems. A story published by a community newspaper on Monday quotes Premier Daniel Smith telling the United Conservative Party town hall in Drayton Valley how she plans to hand over some public hospitals in rural Alberta to the Catholic Church, which will, as a matter of principle, refuse to provide certain basic healthcare services and use that to bejesus out of the AHS administrators. If you think this is an exaggeration, consider Mr. Smith's record, Miss Smith's record at the August 17th party members-only meeting, reported by Brett McKay, who owes his unemployment as rural municipal reporters to the Great West Media Outlet, the $59 million local journalism initiative, providing that at least some of the federal funds earmarked for the preservation of journalism in Canada have been well spent. When you're dealing with a monopoly, Ms. Smith told the Drayton Valley at Alberta Health, they believe that they can deliver any type of care and that there are no consequences and they can continue to deliver bad service. Now, let's forget that principal problem with the quality of the AHS care has nothing to do with managers maliciously delivering bad service and everything to do with chronic underfunding of healthcare by the UCP. Essentially, what happened is they came into power. And like most times this happens, they completely gut the public healthcare system, underfund it, and then service becomes surprisingly worse. When service becomes surprisingly worse, they introduce the idea, what if we have a hybrid model? We put in some private institutions or just, separate entities to handle the overload that we have, and then we can divert some of the money that was being used for public healthcare to private companies, which again, you're doing the opposite of what you're saying. If you're saying, hey, I don't want monopolies to control healthcare, referring to the government, I guess, as a monopoly. So in this case, we can have private monopolies who are going to be handling it, as well as ones that have, religious affiliation, which is going to be really bad for healthcare in general. You don't want to really mix religion and doctors, in the same thing, especially if they might have some pretty deeply held beliefs about what kind of healthcare people should be receiving, depending on the variety of factors. Are you homosexual? Are you trans? Are you a woman? Stuff of this nature is definitely what I would worry about if I was trying to get my healthcare from the Catholic Church.
So that's the healthcare stuff, and we can get into that.
Yes,
so,
definitely.
And so my wife knew I wanted to have children. So yeah, she actually said to me at the time, shortly after in recovery, she said, I release you from our marriage because I know you would like to have children. And I told her, I said, we were married for better, for worse, for sickness and health, for richer, for poorer. So we're building this life together. And so we've been partners in everything that we have done throughout our life, whether it's going into business and these kinds of approaches. And so when it came to politics, she could see that there was an opportunity, but more importantly, she could see that there was a need in our society, which is why she pushed me so hard. She'd been pushing me for years to go into leadership, and I never wanted to because it wasn't a burning desire. But there's a job that needs to be done, and I'm willing to step up and do that job. And so she, like I say, she was one who really pushed me to actually come in and do what I'm doing here today.
So let's talk about your experiences in politics. So you weren't. This wasn't a burning desire, but you became an MLA, a member of the Legislative Assembly, a representative of your constituency. What did you, in regards to, say, participation in sports and also for the protection of women's private spaces? You have a little badge there made of moose hide, I believe, that's emblematic of that. You want to explain that a little bit?
Sure. So this past spring, we introduced a piece of legislation, the first in Canada, that actually was called the Fairness for Women and Girls in Sports. And what it's designed to do is say that biological men cannot compete against women and girls in sports in British Columbia. And the intent of that is not to exclude anybody, but not to take the rights of one people to give to the rights of another people. Mm-hmm. And I think, quite frankly, it's important that the right.
I love how it's always sold that way. It's always sold as if like, no, this is not about bigotry, not about marginalization. It's not about any of that. It's basically just trying to keep spaces safe, right? And we're primarily concerned with women's sports spaces. That's going to be the whole thing. But yes, we want to control women's spaces. Sorry, not control them. We want to manipulate women's spaces to make sure that certain groups we don't like can't get in there. All that shit does is make life scarier for queer kids going to school who want to participate in sports like everyone else, who want to have social lives like everybody else, who want to be able to go to the bathroom like everyone else, all those kind of rules. And when they put them in place, they usually just directly are to target queer children, and they're sold to you as protecting women. Right? We want to protect women's spaces. Well, if you want to do that, why don't you bring attention to the vast majority of women who are attacked by cis men? So if you want to protect women's spaces, that's who you have to protect them from.
Rights of everybody should be able to be protected, and particularly for women and girls, if they want to for example go after scholarships or whatever it is, and they want to be able to compete at high levels, they should be able to compete fairly. And the reason for actually bringing that in is because of so in my riding, First Nations started up a program called the Moose Hide Campaign, and it actually started from a fellow named Paul Lessert, his daughter's now taken it on Raven, and they've expanded it, gone right across the country. And we were actually, as minister, we actually gave them some seed money to get this program up and running and be able to expand. But what it is, it's about men talking to men about honoring and protecting women and girls and trying to end the violence against women and girls. And so
like, it's so profoundly sick. I don't think some people realize just like the degree of racism that they just kind of casually try to weave into their everyday conversations, where it's like, this is not the first time he's done this, by the way. He compared a program that was basically going to make life safer for LGBTQ plus children to the residential school system of Canada. Like, that tweet is still up there. He doesn't give two fucks about it. And a lot of the programs and policies that he's basically been advocating for, all of them are disastrous, including his drug one. He's focusing really heavily right now on getting rid of all these kind of like harm reduction supply programs, ones that will reduce the amount of clean needles on the street or clean drug use supply, paraphernalia, stuff like that. He wants to get rid of it. When like study after study has shown that this stuff slows the spread of diseases that can be spread through needles, like HIV/AIDS. It like going in opposition to that is just like your policy platform is more HIV for everybody, more HIV/AIDS in the general population. If you do that kind of shit,
I wear this frequently in reflection of that, but it's also part of the inspiration to be able to move forward and act like we did last spring. And the interesting part was the left wouldn't even allow it on the floor. They voted against it. They wouldn't even let it pass first reading. First reading is usually just a formality before, and then it gets called for further debate. They wouldn't even let it get past first reading. They voted against it.
So Lyra Sapir tweeted out yesterday some...
Yeah, because it was just bigotry. The response was actually pretty good from the BC NDP, who were like, yeah, we don't want to introduce measures to make kids feel more unsafe in school. Gay kids, trans kids, they go to school like everybody else. They should be made to feel as safe as everyone else. All of these kind of programs, when they're put into place, they are just directly going to be targeting people who are already marginalized. You can say that like, well, I'm actually doing this because I'm trying to give tribute to Indigenous people, or I'm doing this because I'm trying to protect women. I care deeply about protecting women, which is why I, as a man, want to control women's spaces. Yes, I feel like that is within my right to do.
Data in the US that seemed to indicate that about somewhere around 8,000 minor girls in the last 5 years have used insurance money to obtain double mastectomies with the gender affirming front, which I have tweeted out and made a lot of noise about this. I think it's the worst form of quasi-criminal behavior that I've seen among the professional community.
Which, again, is just such a profoundly strange thing to say. Jordan Peterson has never spoken up once about 16 or 17-year-old women who get surgeries, say, because they have medical complications. There's a lot of women, cis women, who get breast surgery, and it's not because they are trying simply to enhance the size or reduce the size of the breasts, but it could be another reason for that. Lots of cis women have gotten breast surgery. They've gotten mastectomies. Anyone who's got perhaps cancer or something of that nature also gets it. But that's never what he talks about. If it's being done as a form of gender-affirming care, of which not a lot of people receive it. I think sometimes people, because of the pundits' obsession with trans folk, it really seems as if like literally tens of thousands of young girls in Canada every year are getting, double mastectomies, when that's not the case. We're talking about dozens. In the same thing in the United States, where everyone is so hyper-focused on like trans kids in sports and making those sports, specifically usually for women's leagues, making those sports fair and safe. And then it's like in each state, how many like athletes are actually trying to compete in these sports and that are getting rejected? Sometimes it's like, well, it's like 0.7% of the population. But then why are you all obsessing over this? You're obsessing over something in which it doesn't happen to a lot of people, in which the entirety of the medical community and consensus is that this is a good thing. Probably the best comparison was someone posted that there is a higher rate of regret for Harry Potter tattoos than there is for people who receive surgery for gender affirming care. I was like, that's actually pretty funny, but it really puts everything into focus when weird ass bigots, usually old bigots, by the way, but weird old bigots are standing there and just obsessing over trans people for a variety of reasons, and trying to make you really afraid of it, right? Like even Matt Walsh did that when he went on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he's talking to Joe Rogan, and he's like, oh yeah, hundreds of thousands of children are getting these surgeries. And then like Jamie looks it up, they put it on screen, and it's like, that's just not true. Sounds scarier though, when you put it like that. It does sound scarier, right? And then rather correct themselves and actually accept reality, or do the right thing and stop being like a professional bigot for money, it turns right into, well, Media Matters is going to have a field day with that one. They're really going to enjoy that. So please, rest of the worldies, no matter where you are, take a lesson from me and the politics in my province. This could happen to you. All right, just be really, really scared. If you have a liberal party, and it usually was a battle between the liberals and the left, and all of a sudden one member of that liberal party was too extreme for the liberal party, leaves and forms his own party, and then that liberal party dissolves, leaving you only now with this option, because this is now what the election is going to be like in my province. It's going to be between these two groups, and you have a choice between a right-wing, and in some cases very far-right party, and a more now centrist party. You could say center-left in some ways, but it's being portrayed as a far leftist, radical, neo-Marxist communist party. They're not. But yeah, it came down to that. Tigwick, thank you. I appreciate it. It's very kind of you. Oh, and also the Freedom Convoy, I'm sure you all remember. A lot of the donors have been donating to this political party. So, yeah, that's also not great to find out that a lot of the Freedom Convoy donor list includes names of several candidates from John Rustad's BC Conservatives. So the political party is also filled with people who are donators to the Freedom Convoy, which I'm sure all of you can remember as a wonderful scene.
Hey, if you'd like to unlock secret bonus episodes as well as uncensored content, go to patreon.com/The Serfs. This show is produced by Anna Loves Riley, Arian McCarthy, Cheryl Alvarez, Comrade Junkie, Doug Caddy, Everything Important, Hagbard Celine, Jimmy Sombrero, Multimondi, Omni, Political Puppy, Preston Kroll, Quiet 185, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Cernicus, Stellar Gwyn, Sebastian Demel, Travis McClinton, Trincel, Words Greenwood, with additional support coming from all of these amazing human beings right here.